welcome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Happy Monday. Oh, that's nice, refreshing.
Yeah.
So Paolo, thank you for being here with us today. So by way of introduction, you are currently the head of engineering for Konfir. And Konfir is a very exciting tech startup company that has been streamlining the employment verification process, amongst other things, in a very innovative way. So it'd be really great to go into a little bit more about the work you're doing there today. Prior to Konfir, you have had multiple kind of senior engineering and team lead positions for companies such as Soprasteria, Fluidly, Solid State Group, so a number of different companies. So clearly you've been there, done that, got the T-shirt when it comes to being an engineering leader. And one of the things we've spoken about in the past, which I think is a really interesting thing that you're doing over at Konfir, is around your production environment. And I think it's quite a unique setup what you've created there. So really keen to discover a little bit more about that as we go through the episode today. But before we kickstart into that, it'd be great just to start with you, really. Find out a little bit about your background, how you got into tech leadership in the first place, and yeah, go from there.
Great. Thank you very much, Guy, for having me.
You're more than welcome.
So, how did I start? Actually, I've got a good story because I almost didn't get into IT.
Shock horror. What happened?
So I'm French. So I've been for the first 22 first years of my life in France, and then moved to Switzerland and the UK. We can come back to that later. So when I was at École des Mines d'Alès, it's an engineering school, and it's what we call generalist. So they try to teach you business, marketing, all of that stuff, and also hard skills. So it was construction, production, IT. So there were different things. Mm-hmm. And I was quite good at materials, everything about materials, right? And I was interested into that. But one of my friends said, "Look, Paolo, you have the choice between materials or IT." And then he showed me the job listing of IT and materials. And
that brought it home.
Yeah, and then he said "Look, you have 100 job posts for IT and only 5 for materials. Which one you should do?" And I was all right, let's go for IT.
Fair enough. That's a good friend. You must.
Yeah, he's a good friend.
You're a lot to thank for.
Yeah. I'm still in contact with him. So that was interesting. So yeah, chose IT, but I remember at the beginning it was really hard to understand everything about. So I love tech, I love computer, but I was mostly younger. I was mostly a consumer of it. So video gaming, for instance, or all the apps and etc. The mobile was great. And when I started to develop real application, it was really hard for me to understand oh, actually now I need to code, and what is a variable? I don't understand really our network and etc. But then the more I was going into it, the better I really enjoyed it. And so I just pour a lot of time into it, to understand coding and architecture. I think I've always been interested into more how things work together.
Yeah.
So more architecture, all the layers, understanding how things are connected together, rather than pure code. I can code, right? But I was more interested into that, system architecture, system design.
Interesting.
So yeah, when I joined Soprasteria, I was a developer, working for different projects, mainly public sector. And quickly, my mentor was an architect, software architect, and quickly I just love the job because, as I said, I love system architecture. It was at the time where we were doing BPM, business process modeling. There were plenty of frameworks like that, rules engine, all of that stuff, and for public sector. And so after that, I moved. So I did 2 years in France, Soprasteria. Then I moved. My wife found a job in Switzerland, okay. So I followed her. Did 4 years in Switzerland, so across multiple projects again, public sector, telco. I actually the telco project was really interesting because that was the first project I really started from the beginning. So Soprasteria is a service agency, right? We are doing services for customers. Yep. So we define the project we have a very structured way of how we do projects, inception, a definition, conception, test, and extra. And so it was the first time I went through the conception of it until like releasing it, even like supporting it production. And that was the really first project. Like we were a team of 3 or 4 to doing that, and it was. I had a lot of learnings actually. On that.
Seeing it all the way through from conception to delivery.
Especially when you release in production and then it doesn't properly work. You know, you're like, now I need to support that. Like, I had to do like weekends a bit more. Like, obviously, like even like bank holidays to make it work. But so quite a good learnings here. All in Java, right? All of that was in Java, and then I moved to the UK again, following my wife.
She's taking you all over the world.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? And when I joined the UK, Soprasteria UK, what happened is I joined the digital innovation team. So it was like a small team of like we were 5 or 6, where we tried to bring like new ways of working to across Soprasteria.
Okay.
So it was the rise of, in 2016, I mean the rise, it was already there, but like the rise for other bigger companies of UX, product management, DevOps, DevOps was, again, also here, right? But for bigger companies, it's like more complicated, like it was slower to take off.
Yeah, sure.
So AWS and etc. Like we had quite a lot of different projects around there. VR, AR, blockchain also, and actually GPT. I had one of my colleagues who worked at GPT before ChatGPT.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was interesting because it was hard to get the data for GPT or to get the algorithm. You had to sign up and like do a bunch of stuff. Now it's like everyone can sign up and ChatGPT and
Absolutely,
it works. So I discovered all of that. But then I realized after 2 years, we were more talking about it rather than doing it. It's like harder and big, like you have more like mass to change in a bigger company. So I wanted to join a startup to start applying all of that, all of what I was doing. And so that's why I joined Fluidly. So as a senior software engineer, and so this is like where I dropped completely Java, always Python and JavaScript, was quite hard. But this is where I learned a lot about product management and how to build a product. It's completely different than being like a project base, because project base is all about estimate and getting right in the budget, etc. In product, it's about like making money, right? But making money, like it doesn't really matter how many hours you pour into it. It's the product has to work, right, to make revenue.
Ultimately, I get the methodology probably is very different to Soprasteria. Presumably working a lot more of an agile.
Oh yeah, fashion. Like definitely. Like in product, everything is based, or in bigger, in Soprasteria, like everything is based to have a repeatable process. When you're a startup, you also kind of have a repeatable process, and we can get into it when we talk about the production only and how we work at Konfir, but you're still more like agile, right? You have to, if tomorrow a client comes and says, I want that, and it's your biggest client, then you have to do it. You can't just. So joined Fluidly, became like also a squad lead. A squad like as in Spotify squads, we are like 3 different squads.
Cool.
So like with a cross-functional team with product manager, sales, engineers, and we also had DevOps. Like 2 years there, and then after 2 years at Fluidly, I got back to an agency actually, so Solid State.
Okay.
So at least software engineer. Solid State was but my time there was great because their primary clients are startups. So they take like really early stage startup and they build a software for them. And all the people there had this product mentality. Even it's an agency, it's a project for them, for Solid State overall. It's still like a product mentality.
Interesting.
So even like I think all the people at Solid State created a product on the side, either working or like in the process of working. So very good mindset. Actually built 2 projects here, big projects where I also introduced production only.
Okay.
So even for
bit
clients.
of a theme going.
Fluidly was the first time I got introduced to production only, and then joined Konfir. Chris just contacted me because I worked with him, and I was very involved with the tech part and how we should deliver and how to make sure we have a successful company. So he offered me a role and then I accepted. So I joined in March 2022 we were only the four of us, mainly the leadership team, and then we had to recruit for engineers and product manager and a UX. So now we are a team of 10, 14, I would say, with some contractors, legals, etc. So that's where am I today. So head of engineering at Konfir.
Awesome, cool. Thanks for that. Really interesting. I like your story there around how you started. Well, how you got into tech in the first place and following the salary. I love that. But the fact that you kind of fell in love with the architecture and, like you say, it feels like you've always had that sort of more holistic overview of spotting the, more of a product mindset, how what you're doing relates to the business. Whereas very often in technology, I found certainly the thing that sort of hampers very strong coders' ability to get into leadership positions is very often they love that piece. They're very analytically minded and they love the coding and sort of, that piece is kind of really fulfilling, but then don't really enjoy necessarily or able to make that transition into what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, how that actually relates into the business and sort of understanding the bigger business problem and that kind of thing. But it seems like that was always quite a natural mindset for you from day one. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, definitely. If I'm being honest, I don't know, for instance, coding another logging screen, I find it boring now. Okay. Quite boring, It's again another screen or another form, It's so the tech is evolving and it's great, and we again for production we can talk about that a bit later. That's amazing what the tech does, right? But I prefer understanding. I'm more focused on what can bring value, right? How tech can bring value to someone. So when I think it's powerful when you see a client says, I want to do that. For instance, employment checks, for instance, at Konfir, how we do, right? And when they see a system that actually does it automatically and super fast, they are super happy. And they are willing to pay for it. And I think that's what it's actually really interesting. To see the people using tech because it really fulfills a pain in our everyday job. A bit for instance, GitHub Copilot, right? It's also fulfilling a big need in developer jobs. And as I said, I was at first, when I was young, I was consuming things and I always was fascinated by all those applications, all what we can do, everything online, for instance. And being part of that, now creating things online is always for me is good. When I was in public sector also, I was kind of feeling really interested on and really invested into building those applications for the public sector because it helps people, right?
Yeah.
It just every day, instead of going to your to an office where you have to wait or you have to take an appointment, and so it's very slow. Why not doing everything online? And when I was public sector, I always thought about helping just people and everyday people that makes an impact. So and same system architecture. Also, I think I always ask, how does this work? I can't just say, oh yeah, it works and that's it. So I think, for instance, at the beginning, I was using Spring Boot.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Spring Boot didn't exist at that time, but Spring and Hibernate, ORMs.
Back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't just say I use it, right? Yes, I use it, but how does that work inside, right? How is it mapped to the database? How does it work with performance? Why is it better than something else? Why not recreating our own RMs? Always interested into how things are working together. And the more now I'm doing leadership role and managing people, I'm always thinking also how things work when with people. What is the best process for people to work together, to be efficient and to have fun. So always interested into systems rather than the pure code.
Nice, I love that. And just to reiterate, I think that's when I think back through all the leaders that I've seen that have, I really respect and have gone on and achieved great things, I think it is that mindset, that sort of more holistic mindset that really kind of rings true. And I'd love to find out a little bit more in a moment about Konfir, and let's talk a little bit about that environment that you've brought to so many places now, and so many smiles on faces as a result. But let's start by talking a little bit about your leadership style, I suppose. So when you talk about creating an environment, a fun environment, a great place for people to work, what qualities do you aspire to to have as a tech leader? What are the most valuable qualities that you think a tech leader should possess?
It's a hard question because there are so many ways of leading people, right? But I think I've tried to find 3 of them that were like the most important. So the first one is, for me, is ability to navigate in the unknown. So when you are at a leadership role or as a leader, you don't have the answers to everything. You will never have it. So you can replicate things that have been done in other companies. So every company is unique, right? So some of the things are more unique than others, right? You can replicate things that are working in other companies to your company, how you manage people, how you do the process, how you deliver, and etc. But there is not one unique way of it working. And what works in another company can maybe not work in your company. Yeah. So this ability to navigate the unknown is really important, is researching things a lot. Also weigh the pros and cons on things and make decisions, even if you don't know everything. Yeah. And I think it's funny because I think it's what separates a bit more leaders than employees. When I was an employee, I was always turning to my manager and ask all the questions, we should do this and we should do that. And my manager always seemed to have all the answers, but actually he didn't know himself, right? He's trying to figure out things. Yeah. But as an employee, you feel that confidence from your leader. You think so that's one thing, the leader being able to navigate that and find the answers. Yeah,
but I think it's on that point. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's the thing that separates good leaders in my mind is it's the fear of not necessarily making the wrong decision. It's just like you say, making a decision, and then let's hope it's the right decision based on all the analysis I've done and all the information I've got right now. But don't let that disable you from taking action and moving forward, because worst case scenario, it's a learning curve, isn't it? You learn what hasn't worked as well as you do what has worked. So I totally agree with that. I think that's very true in recruitment as well.
And it's about being also transparent to how you make that decision, because the more transparent you are, the better people will understand. And then they will just, be on board with the decision, right? And also creating, and if the decision is wrong, as you said, all right, it's wrong, but creating a safe space around having mistakes. Yeah. It's fine. What is not fun is not learning from it. Yeah. Right? I mean, you can make mistakes where you can bring down the business, right? You shouldn't do it, right? Obviously.
Ideally not.
So that's why there is preparation, always. And that's why you always research and etc. But if you make a mistake after that, it's learning from it. Going back to production only, but we have postmortems and we learn, we make sure at Konfir we have a lot of learnings every time we do mistakes. So it don't happen after that.
Nice, fantastic, cool. Sorry, I interrupted there. So that was the sort of first part you said about qualities of a leader, and then
So the two of us, the second one would be motivation, being able to motivate people. Yeah. I think a lot of people remember when their managers are motivate people. When you're a boring manager, it's nobody remembers really, and it's again because it's hard, a startup, you pour a lot of work and it works or it doesn't work. It's always this constant and giving this constant energy to just say to the teams, hey, it's fine, let's continue, let's work together, we'll make it, and we'll do great work together. So always motivate the team. That's an important one.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I think I totally agree with you, and I think that's one that's definitely easier said than done, isn't it? I think it's not easier said than done. I think it's something that's necessarily you don't have to be manipulative with the way you motivate. I think very often it is, like you say, it's almost like a transference of passion, isn't it? If you're not energized and motivated in a way, it's very difficult to motivate others. And I think very often people think leadership is about just telling people what to do, and sort of directing people down a route, but actually, to really get the best out of somebody, you kind of need to light that fire in them, don't you? Sort of inspire them in a way. And I think it's difficult to do that unless they kind of feel you're in in the same boat, kind of in the journey with them. So yeah, I really agree with that one as well.
And bouncing on what you just said, like, tell people, like, even if you are passionate and you tell people, it doesn't work, because it's also like listening to people, what is motivating for them.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you, like, for instance, I love like product, right? But when you try to hire, like, I don't know, like a data engineer, for instance, right? They care more about data and maybe tech, right? But it's fine, as long as we focus on the right work to do together, we do the right prioritization, and the work we do like creates value for clients.
Yes.
That's the most important. But yeah, listening is also, when you try to motivate, you have to listen to what other like are motivated by, and so you can answer to those needs.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, very good point, yeah, absolutely. And was there a third in the trilogy?
Yeah, third one, I think it's something I learned quite a lot, is ability to communicate with stakeholders, with anyone in the business.
Yeah, yeah.
Often when we are engineers, we think a lot in black and white. It works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Especially when we are young, we code things, and actually we are measured by that, right? We are measured by, is your feature working or not?
Yeah.
So everything is a bit black and white, and we assume that because it's tech and it's hard stuff, like we assume that other people can understand why some things are hard, and it's normal, right? It's hard, and you don't have to explain yourself. But product people, like, it's not their job. It's not their job to, or like leaderships, it's not their job to understand how tech works.
Yeah.
So you have, as a tech lead, or even as an engineer, right, communicate with those people and make it understandable.
Yeah.
And connect the dots between what are the needs of the business with how we can solve it with tech, and why we should take a path compared to the other, because it's not easy for like anyone to understand tech.
Yeah.
So ability to communicate is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think if there was one trait I would pick over the last kind of 10 years that I think has become most important really in technology, and especially with the rise of, like AI, large language models and that kind of thing, where a lot of the grunt work necessarily, GitHub Copilot exactly, has been taken out of engineering. That ability to kind of wrap some soft skills around it, communicate, like say stakeholder engagement, I think has become the most important skill, certainly when stepping into leadership, but I think just actually, generally speaking, across the board, I think it's a very, very important thing. And I think it's also in leadership as well, a really fine line between the ability to do that, but also not coming across in a overly patronising way where people feel like you're just pandering to and sort of mansplaining something but actually being able to kind of really, and I think it's your point there of really having respect for the product and understanding the business problem. If you can relate it back to that, then people can very often sort of understand things a little bit better. But no, I think it is a very important skill to develop as a leader, but quite a tricky one to get right, especially when you're dealing with different personality types that maybe sometimes don't want to feel like they're having everything explained to them, but still need to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's use ChatGPT. I think it's a good one, right? When you have to craft a message or whatever, like, just ask ChatGPT, like, prompt. You say, like, I want to say this, and this is the message I wanted. Like, can you make it more formal or like maybe more fun? And yeah, use ChatGPT, right? It's there, right? You have the knowledge of the world, like of the internet, and it crawled a lot of data, so it knows. Communicating is important, and as you said, like, not patronizing is important too. Going back to listening again to people. That's why it's a hard question, right? Because as a leader, you need a lot of skills.
That's why I ask it.
But listening is key too, right? Because when you are also like a tech lead, you have a lot of strong opinions generally on how things should be done, and that's why you are in this leadership role, because you move things. But you don't do everything alone. The team is here, right? The team is everything. Everyone has a job to do. Everyone is making the success. So listening, and even things are not the way you think it is, it doesn't mean it's not right. It's probably true and correct more because they are like day to day with the job and day to day with the features. compared to us, like where we are a bit more, like recruitment or like infosec or other things.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's get on to talking a bit about Konfir as a business thing, because I think that's going to be, and then we can hear all about your fantastic environment that you've built. So as a business, Konfir is streamlining that employee verification process, which, let's face it, I think we've all been through in some way, shape and form, and often it can be quite a manual, quite a painful, time-consuming process. So how are you guys going about that, first and foremost? And then, let's talk a little bit about how you're approaching it from an engineering perspective, and talk a bit about your production environment. So, tell us a little bit about it in the first instance, and how you're tackling that problem for the world.
Sure. So Konfir, so it's a company that has been created in 2021. The product as it is now has been released in August 2022. It went through different iterations. We have several clients, paid clients now. So the process is, streamlining employment reference, as you said. Let's take before Konfir, right? So everyone...
BK.
Yeah. Everyone, I mean, not everyone, but a majority of people are doing background checks when you start a new job. Mm-hmm. So you go through different checks, ID verification, DBS checks, criminal records, Financial Conduct Authority, FCA checks, could be directors of company, all depending on the checks. And one of which is employment reference, where did you work the last 3 to 5 years? Mm-hmm. And this process is done by what we call background checkers. So generally, companies don't do it themselves. They outsource that to background checkers. Yeah. And these background checkers, although they are doing it, but today it's not great experience, right? They are making more money on other checks that are automated, but this one is not automated. What they generally do is they go on Google, right? And they type the name of the company, find a phone number, find an email address, and then contacts, and then try to work through the chain to find a hiring manager or an HR to be able to prove the employment of the person, of the candidate. Mm. So obviously they create, they start to automating things, right? They create email automation, SMS automation. They also build a database of contacts so they can be faster the next time. But it's still very manual, and they still have to review what the person said on these candidates. So this is slow and not even secure. Sometimes they ask for bank statements or pay slips through email. So so you can just lose the email or transfer the email, and everybody has access to the information. So not secure. Mm. So Chris found this opportunity to streamline the process. And so instead of, we are reversing everything, flipping it on its head. Instead of going to the employer, we thought about it, right? But we don't do anything different than what they do today. Mm. We decided to go through the candidates. And we have those data sources available to us that can create a picture of the candidates. So it could be today, we've got 2 data sources, open banking and payroll. So what we do, we send the candidate an SMS on behalf of the background checker. So we can do customization, or we can be integrated through an API. So we are behind the scenes. It's not our brand there. It's the brand of the background checker. Yeah. White labeling. Exactly. What was the word? That was the word I was looking for. And what we do is we go through the Konfir journey. So it's a set of screens where we tested different things, with the tone of voice, and we're still trying to refine it, different A/B testing, and etc. Where we ask the candidate to connect their bank account and their payroll. And for bank account, we ask them through open banking, and payroll, it's direct payroll APIs. Yeah. And after they connect, what happens is we pull the data. So everything is through consent, right? We don't do behind people, right? Everything is through consent. We have to store the consent. We are a GDPR compliant. We are ISO certified. we've got all the things right. We are also attribute service provider. It's like a government trust framework.
Okay.
So we give like those attributes. So we can do those attributes. So we can be like a processor or controller.
Right.
So yeah, everything is clean, secure. So we pull the data and then we start applying data science, on top of this data. So I will give a very basic example. Let's say we see like a payslip, not a payslip, sorry, a banking transactions where like you have 12 payments from True North, right, above £2,000, and the last Friday of the month, we say like, okay, guy, pretty certain you worked for True North the last 12 months, right? There is also like the issues with weekly pays, like different amounts, etc. But we apply data science on top of that banking data to be able to find like how long have you been in that company and who is that company. Sure. Payroll is a bit easier, it's more structured data. Yeah. But then we need to combine this banking data and payroll data.
So validator,
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like a waterfall approach, like banking is like, I would say the minimum, right? And then if you add more like payroll and or even like tax information would be amazing. Like you can build a full picture of the person like and instantaneously, because when we connect, it's instantaneous. We process the data like straight away. Wow. So
how does that take out of interest? We say instant. Is it like literally kind of?
Yeah, it's instant, right? Wow. I would say like even if you have like thousands transactions, it can be like maybe 1 minute, but it's 1 minute.
It's like you say, when you're thinking about actually that historical manual process could take weeks.
Yes.
If not months.
Yeah. It's we have with one of the clients actually we brought down the like a turnaround time by like more than a week, more than 7 days down.
Wow, crazy.
So and our candidates, they go through the journey in 5 minutes. Some of them are like as quickly as 2 minutes.
That's a good point as well, isn't it? Because you've got to make it not too laborious for the candidate side as well. So if you can make it frictionless on both ends, it's a huge value add, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's what we're building at the moment, and we are continuing to expand our data sources. We think about other data sources to bring in, FCA, for instance, and continue like to automate and bring those insights on top of the data, because we've already like capturing the data fast, but we need to go one step further. Is like automation of the review process. So you can think a bit of like ID verification. Yeah. Like when a company like ID verifier won't send a picture of the person and the video of the person and the picture of the passport to the company, right? They will do the checks themselves. Yeah. Like the ID verifier will just, all done. So now it's like you can focus on something else. And we want to do the same with employment checks. So we want to do like not make the decisioning. We don't make the decision on whether this person is fit or not. Yeah. We don't do that, but what we want is like automate this process where they don't have to do it anymore. Sure. And we don't need like a manual person to review like every day and and then we can focus on something else more important for their business.
Yes. Yeah.
And the last thing what we're trying to do also is we are thinking of us as like your as an attribute service provider. So tomorrow you can get your employment history in a wallet, a bit like ID verification wallet, or even Apple, like driving license wallet, where tomorrow if you want to be checked, and you can be checked like in 2 minutes because you already have your credentials with us. So that's one of the other things we are exploring too.
That's cool. That's interesting. Yeah, something like talking about the products. Is that something on the roadmap that's yet to be developed? Sort of the next exciting tranche. Nice, cool. Yeah, I can really see the need for the product, and it feels like you're tackling an issue that, well, let's face it, it's a global process, isn't it? Really, that's done everywhere, and like I say, at the moment, done pretty much in the same archaic kind of outdated way. So I can definitely see the gap in the market for the product, and it feels like the way you're doing it feels like a perfect example, really, of how tech and data can genuinely solve a problem, like I say, almost instantaneously if done in the right way and engineered in the right way. So very exciting indeed, which I guess leads us on to talking about how you're engineering the solution and the platform. So talk us through, we've obviously had a chat in sort of previous meetings about your production environment, how you guys are doing it. But yeah, talk us through from the horse's mouth, so to speak, exactly how you're doing it, and yeah, go from there.
Thank you. So yeah, I brought some stats.
I love a stat. Come on,
stats.
Intrigue me.
Recently, so on average, so we are a team of 5 engineers. So I would say 4.5 because I code, but not all full time.
We'll say 5. Come on,
Let's say 5.
Don't put yourself down.
So on average, we do 20 deploys a day. So that means the product change 20 times a day.
Wow.
Right. Pull request stays up on average 30 minutes. That's including the front-end repository. And front-end is a bit hard to automate. So like if I take out the front-end, it's more like 10 minutes. So once a PR is up, it's like going in. We have no downtime deployments. We are always up, right? So there is no like we stop the product and with the SaaS product, and we say there is a downtime. No, it's like always up. And our change failure rate is hovers around 3%. Right? So,
some powerful stats.
So those stats are the DORA metrics, right? I'm a big fan of like the DORA metrics, the four key metrics to measure the performance of engineering. Mm-hmm. And because these stats are so coming from Accelerate, the book Accelerate. It's been a research, and like it's how to measure the efficiency of an engineering team according like compared to the business, right? It's not just like velocity for the velocity. Yeah. It's measuring the efficiency of a business as a whole and how like what metrics are we need to measure for the engineering to make this business successful. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I'm following every month. And so the way it works is today at Konfir, we have only the production environment to be able to do those stats. And we don't have any dev, we don't have any staging. Of course, we have the local environment, we have CI/CD, but every time we merge a pull request, 5 minutes later, it's in production. So yeah, like every time I say that, a lot of people are like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, are you sure? Let's just close that door.
Yeah,
I mean that is genuinely unique. Obviously, I speak to a lot of companies on a daily basis, and CTOs, heads of engineering that clearly have different types of production environment. But I think that is particularly unique. To kind of like submit a pull request, and like I say, 5 minutes later, it's live code and in production. So, I guess my next big question is how.
Yeah. So it's really about two things, right? The first thing is the mindset and creating products. If you take the Scrum, for instance, if you take Scrum, and you do sprints every 2 weeks, so I have 52 weeks in the year, so you make 26 releases. If you do 20 deploys a day, you do 20 times 52, 2 or 365. That's a big number, but you can approximately change whenever the course of what you are doing, right? So we've been very agile, and it's about like having this mindset of where we care about our clients, and we care about like the speed, how we deliver it. One of the good examples was we have a client that is integrating with our API, and they ask a question around 10:15 in the morning. It's like, hey, I think I spotted an issue here. Can you change that for us? Add a field or whatever. And 15 minutes later, we're like, yeah, it's ready. So you don't lose time with the clients. And actually, they're like, oh, really? It's ready? And it's like, yeah, it's ready. You can use it. Yeah, it works. So we are quite impressed at that. And
absolutely, yeah.
You just like, unlock their own teams to do things, right? Or if there is a bug somewhere, you just like fix it in 5 minutes. Yeah. And it's also like the team caring about things being done, When you have production only, like everybody thinks about production and the end client first.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Sometimes, a lot of engineers, the famous meme, it works on my machine.
Yeah.
And when you have a staging or dev, it works on my machine. It worked in staging, Like one of the good examples also is like database migration. So you do database migration, staging, all works really well. and then you push in production, and the database migration is like endless. It locks your production database, and then like you are stuck. And how do you kill? And then you need like an SRE to go to your database and then kill everything, and then you have downtime and etc. Because nobody thought like, oh yeah, actually we have 1 billion rows in production, but we have 1,000 in staging. So it tunes the mindset of people to be focused on the end goal and on the client and the end goal on will it work in production rather than will it work in staging. And then, and it's this approach of owning end to end rather than just thinking, oh, it's the time for QA or the tester to do it. No, it's like, no, it's your time to like, right? You are doing end to end. You are conceiving it. You are designing it, developing it. You are releasing it. And you're the famous mantra, you build it and you run it.
Yeah.
And everyone is like being now careful, much more careful with the features that they are developing rather than if it's a staging, because staging actually is a safe environment.
Yes.
Right? There is no two productions. Production is unique. And you have to, I would say, control the beast, right? You have to learn it, you have to understand it, how it reacts under like all those conditions. Doing performance testing, again, like you can fake it in staging, but you can't fake it. Like production is production, like this spike of like having millions of customers. I don't know, for like a Shopify, for instance, would like have millions of customers on a Black Friday sales. So you have to learn to use it and understand how it reacts and how it performs. So that's one thing, like the mindset of people, like thinking production first.
Yeah.
And thinking about this quality. And the second point is about quality, right? So when you remove staging, then you are removing a safety net. So you don't have this environment where you can test things. It's gone. So you have to find other ways of testing things. So instead of pouring a lot of effort into staging, trying to maintain as close as production, it's very expensive, because you have to build the same servers, you have to maintain it. If it goes down, you have to maintain it, you have to update. I don't know if you have a database update, you have to do in staging, in production. So it's very expensive. It's people looking after it. Yeah. You need to anonymize the data. You need to, too many things to do. All of this effort and costs, instead of putting in staging, we invest it in production. So what we do, we harness more before and after.
Okay.
So how do you do it before? Before you do like, for instance, feature flags, right? So when you deploy, instead of like, you could deploy like unfinished features. Yeah. If they are behind a feature flag, that's fine. Okay. Right? So you are constantly integrating into production and make sure everything works together in production. Okay. So you hide the feature, and once this feature is ready, you just turn on the flag, and then it's available for everyone, and it's working. And you know it's working because it's already in production.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. That was going to be my big question actually, around how do you know then until you've actually put it out there that it is working? But yeah, that's a clever way of doing it. Yeah.
So we've got feature flags, and then we are quite big on test-driven development. And when we do TDD, so we write the test first. And when we write the test, it's not about like unit tests. It's funny because at the beginning when we had the new engineers coming in on board, we were talking about unit tests, integration tests, etc. But actually, when you do TDD in a mono env, we call it mono environment production only. Yeah. When you do that, you get away from unit and integration test. There is no unit, there is just behavior tests, right? It's like use case test. How can we replicate locally, the maximum as you can, the behavior that will be in production? Obviously you can't, right? As I said, like already, but you do the maximum. So for instance, we have end-to-end tests. We're using like Test Cafe for our front end, but we like automated testing that will go through the screens and then click on all the buttons. But we write the test as is a use case. So for instance, the candidate will connect their bank account, and then we go through all the screens and making sure it goes through all the screens. And every time we run the CI/CD, it runs through this test again and again and again. And if you break something, it's easy because the test will break.
Yeah.
So, and we try to also hit production API as much as we can. So we have front end and back end separated. And if we can't really replicate sometimes, for instance, like we can't connect to a bank account, obviously it's hard. Yeah. So what we do, we mock. But we
Okay.
always try to think when we write tests outside in. So always think, how can we be close to the use case? And if we can't, then we remove bits and we mock where we can, like where we can't really reproduce.
Yeah.
But we don't rely mocks because mocks are not the real production.
Sure.
And so, yeah, we rely on those tests everywhere. So everything is tested. Like, we don't even look at code coverage. But I did a little exercise trying to look at what was our code coverage. And even without thinking about code coverage, the metric per se, right? We are focusing more on good tests. We have a coverage of more than 80% of the code.
That's amazing.
And then in some like projects, we have like 95%.
Wow.
Because
their numbers are, a lot of people would aspire to get to, aren't they?
yeah, so obviously you need to exclude like all the scripts and etc. But yeah, 95%. We have some missing bits, and you always miss something, right? You can't be like 100% perfect. But every time we add a if, before adding this if, we think, okay, let's write the test.
Yeah.
So, and when we review PR, like we have people like looking at it, have you added a test? You can't approve if you haven't changed the test, because that means you've changed something in production that we won't be able to reproduce and measure if it's like working the next time.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. That is amazing. Do you know what I really love about that answer, and especially the first part of the answer, was you kind of, rather than just delving straight into this is how we do it from an engineering perspective, it started with the word mindset, and I think that's really key. And just sort of hearing you talk there, I was thinking about, I guess similar to like the difference between like a free climber and a rock climber that's got the harness and got the rope. You're going to be concentrating a lot more if you're the free climber without any support or any kind of rope to kind of hold you in place. And I think, like you say, that sort of instilling the right mindset, because really what it's doing, it's really sharpening the mindset and focusing on best engineering practices from the get-go, isn't it? And that's kind of one of the huge positives, I suppose, that all engineers that are working in that kind of environment, in theory, they should really be developing and growing a lot quicker and adapting a lot with the right kind of mindset, because there isn't that safety net. I'm pretty sure you obviously do have those, like you talked about the hidden flags, etc. But yeah, I think it's incredible that it's sort of sharpening that. We've spoken quite a bit about. Well, I can see a lot of the positives there from the way you're working. Are there any potential downsides or negatives, in your opinion, of the way you're working in this sort of live production environment that you wouldn't necessarily have if you were going through the staging, let's say?
Yeah, I will answer the question. Can you just go back on mindset? I think one of the change in mindset or behavior of engineers, one of the biggest change is they are releasing smaller and smaller pull requests. So when you're in staging, it's fine to have these big 20 files, 30 files, like keeping all your feature in staging, and then you release it and then it will be tested in staging. Now it's like, oh, I'm going to add a new database field, right? I'm going to do this new if, but I'm not very sure about it. And now they are like looking at more the riskiest thing to do and how can we minimize it. And so they release like very small PRs. It could be like for sometimes like a 5-line change.
Yeah.
The tests. So the test is a bit bigger always, but then like the real actual implementation is like 5 lines. And that's it. It's like, how will it behave in production?
Yeah.
Like when we have, 1 million rows when we do searching on a field. So yeah, that's one of the biggest change in mindsets we have. To go back to your question, I think it's trade-offs, right? Production only, like mono-env, works well for us. Maybe it won't work like for other people, but it's all about trade-offs. Like I prefer to deal. So the one of the issues, for instance, we have is we always have to be backward compatible. For instance, it's really hard. Sometimes you want to do a kind of a get rid of the past. Do not a big bang, but I don't know. Let's say you make a change in the screen, then you want to change in the API. Now you have to version the API.
Yeah.
You have to make sure it works before. Yeah. Where like if you can stop the deployment, you just like your production, you stop everything, you put everything in prod, and then you release it, and then done, right?
Yeah.
You kind of like delete all code, but now we have to delete the code like as we go, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Also, like because it's zero downtime, like how do you upgrade Postgres database, right? Now you have to make sure like everything is correct. Like sometimes it's harder. It feels like some bits feel slower.
Yeah.
but those downsides are actually making it more stable overall.
Not really downsides, I guess, either. They're just sort of making you, work a bit more thoroughly.
Yeah. And also, like, it adds other, like, skill sets, you know, because I said, like, we do more on testing on before and etc. But you have to do also more on after. So you have to have a very good observability of your production environment. So, for instance, at Konfir, all our components have metrics, and we follow them, and we have monitoring dashboard everywhere. I don't know, I think we have 15 dashboards for all our components, something like that. We measure them by, like, if they work properly, like the load, and we have alerting everywhere, like health checks. So it requires more DevOps, you know, more observability that sometimes engineers don't have, you know. Also it's hard to get people having this mindset, you know, having an end-to-end mindset.
It's the first time a lot of engineers that presumably join will have worked in that kind of environment. There's not many companies that are probably out there doing it, so it must be. I guess it's probably a kill and a cure in the same way. I guess a lot of people are probably very excited to work in that kind of environment, but like I say, maybe need to slightly adapt their mindset before they're capable of doing so.
Yeah. So the first time I got introduced to mono environment, I think I always liked. I didn't have a name for it, right? But until I joined Fridley, you know, I was always like, I wanted to push things in production, you know, like deliver value quickly and then it's like it's working for clients and it's amazing without like any issue with quality. And the first time I got introduced to mono environment was at Fridley. The CTO there, Mike Hancock, like pushed for it. And as you said, like the mindset of people. So we had some people who were like very like cautious or like wary. They're like, oh, it won't work. Yeah. But actually, you need a mix of those people, right? People are a big cowboy, you know, like, oh yeah, let's deliver it and let's do things and it doesn't really matter, you know. Point, yeah. And those people are very cautious because, and same at Solid State, I had like some people really cautious, but actually you have to listen to them because they will make it work even better. Because if you have only cowboys, like it won't work. Like you will push things in production, but like it will fall apart.
Yes.
But if you have like a mix of those two people, like those two kind of people, then you can make it work very well because you can listen all the concerns and you like harness everywhere like your production environment.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a great point actually, and it shows again the value of a diverse team, especially in that kind of scenario. They have different personalities, sort of counterbalancing each other and providing that perspective. I guess with that in mind, do you, even if you're recruiting for maybe one sort of temperament or one experience type or the other, are there certain characteristics and attributes, a sort of common thread that runs throughout all of the people that you feel do work well in the team? Any kind of attributes that you look for consistently, irrespective of which side of the spectrum they may be on?
Yeah, I think one thing that is quite common is caring about the product, caring about like, other people too. Like when I see like people are in mono environment but are quite invested, you know, into caring about our clients. It's like, we have this power of releasing 20 times a day, and when you approve a PR, you have the power of like releasing in production without oversight of anyone, right? I'm not here like looking at all the pull requests. No, it won't work, right? If you want to scale. But it's just like, people are making sure everything works correctly, and they have this end user mindset always, customer in mind. And as I said, like with observability, like they care about the data now, like is the feature working in production? Like when, like we have a lot of reporting too, like we are very data driven when we make decisions. And so I can see like people just going into Mixpanel or like we have AWS QuickSight. They just go into it and then they review the data and they see like if a like feature that they just delivered, it's actually working or not, and is it driving, you know, revenue. So, and caring again like about other people, because again like mono environment cannot work without listening to each other. Yeah. And trying to refine the process and make sure we had some postmortems, right, where you deliver something actually it breaks. We can talk about that. Actually, let's talk about it.
It's probably got a good time to talk about how you reflect on things that maybe haven't quite gone to plan.
So that's why like caring about people. So we do postmortems. So it happens, like nothing is like 100% sure, even with staging. And I would again argue like with staging you have a false sense of security because again staging is not prod. And so when it doesn't go as planned, we do postmortems. So generally we do them as soon as we fix the bug. So let's say we had a downtime, for instance, we released something and we had a downtime and we fixed the downtime and then we jump on a postmortem straight away, right? And we go like a forensics analysis.
Okay.
So it's blameless. We don't care like who did what. Why? Because when you do a postmortem, that's why we go very deep into the postmortem. Sometimes someone, right, will push a change, and that will be the trigger of the downtime. But actually, it's not. It's just a trigger. Like you have a big background, a lot of decisions that led to this situation where the last engineer merging the request is actually the trigger.
It's a very pragmatic way of looking at it. There's not many engineering managers that would think that.
So you make tons of decisions, and maybe like 6 months ago we said, oh, that's fine, like nobody's using it, and then like, oh, now we're making a change, and we forgot that 6 months ago we said like, oh, actually we should pay attention to that, right? So that's why we go back as much as we can, but people have a tendency to start the postmortem and I merged the pull request and it went wrong. No, what was before?
Yeah.
So
I love that. Yeah.
You go through all of that, and then we say like, what are the action learned, and we need like again diversity, like all the people in the team to look at it and say, oh, I think we should do that because like I don't know, I think we should add a more monitoring, or maybe for infrastructure changes we need like two reviews instead of one, or we need like a bit more upfront like design next time. But we try to take pragmatic approaches. We don't want to go over process after that because sometimes when there is a postmortem, like everybody, panics. It's like, oh, now we need like a new like a process and we'll need extra, like 10 approvals before making changes. Like no, like it happens. Like maybe one little tweak can actually make the entire process safer. Yeah. Let's not like over-engineer things. We still need to keep our velocity. We trust people, like people learn from their mistakes. So we really make sure like we don't do it again, obviously. Yeah. And those little tweaks will work, but we don't have to rethink the entire process,
Yeah, it's great. I think that what you mentioned there, that sort of safe space, I suppose, is akin to what we were talking about a bit earlier with the most valuable attributes of a leader, in my opinion, is the ability to kind of reframe failure for the people in the business, because certainly in recruitment anyway, it's probably one of the biggest blockers, I think, to people making progress or even taking action, is that kind of fear of what if or what happens, and if I do this wrong, in the more draconian recruitment companies out there that shall not be named, there's a real palpable sense of aftermath or what's going to happen as a result. And I think like I say, having that ability to sort of wrap your arms and create that sort of orb of safe space for your team to really actually go, well, look, the mistake is the blame's almost academic. It's actually the mistake is what it is, and let's sort of pick that apart and all learn from it. And I think that reframing of failure is fantastic. It's a really key thing.
And I can thank my CTO at Fruitly at the time, because I did a big mistake. So it was interesting. In the end, it went well, right? We didn't have to pay anything, but so I joined the company, and as I said, like I love reporting and product, product mindset, etc. And so I was tasked quite like in the first month or two, so during the probation period, I was tasked to bring some analytics and reporting. And so we use like a tool called Segment. So it's a tool where you push an event there, and then you can dispatch the event into different like destinations.
Yes.
So it's quite nice, right? So I started to implement that, look at the pricing and etc., but didn't pay much attention. And so what Fruitly was doing is like generating cash flow forecasting. And so we wanted to measure between the like starting the generation of a cash flow forecast to the end and see how long it takes, and where can we at different points and where can we refine, right, with this process and bringing faster value to the client. And so I introduced segment into the back end. Generally, it's more front end thing, where you mix panel, you click on events and etc. per client, per user. And so I bring it into the back end. But I didn't pay attention that basically I was generating a new unique ID every time a cash flow was generated.
Oh.
But the problem is segment is billing you on number of clients. Number of IDs, different IDs you have, right? So like I don't remember the pricing tier now, but it was like for up to 1,000 and then up to 10,000 and then up to extra. And so I remember that day where the CTO came it's like, Paolo, stop segment now. It's like, what? Stop segment, like don't ask questions. And then he went back. It's like, all right, so we stopped segment, everything turned off. And then he took me into like a one-to-one. He said like, all right, we have a bill of 50,000 for segment. I was like, oh no. And I was like, I'm all right. So I'm 2 months in. It's my probation period, Actually, it was his probation period too. He joined like a month before me.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I was like very stressed, I was like, I'm joining a startup and now like in 2 months I'm making a big mistake and it's over, right? And yeah, he was quite a good negotiator actually. He is still, of course. And so in the end, like he talked to Segment and Segment said, okay, it's a common mistake. So we're gonna wipe off the bill, 50,000, and you're gonna pay normal 150, like whatever we were paying at the tier. So in the end, he got like okay,
Good work.
Yeah, good work for him. Yeah, negotiating that, and yeah, and it was my first thing as failure in like my first real big mistake, where the CTO like said, okay, don't do that again, but to me, but also to everybody in the team, like we did this postmortem together, and we were like, oh yeah, like it can happen. It's a team effort. It's a team problem. Yeah. And actually, thank him because then I could thrive later on at Really.
Fantastic. That's a great example. And I think it's a great example of strong leadership, isn't it? It's leadership that not only resolved the problem and thankfully, sorted it out, but he could respond in 2 ways and you could have internalized that in 2 ways and, take that with you into the rest of your career. And thankfully, it felt like it was sort of, in the end, a positive learning experience. But I think that often makes, I always say an expert in any field is somebody that's made every single mistake in that field, to then help others. And it feels like that was quite a shaping experience for your leadership style.
Yeah, I'm cost conscious. A lot.
I bet, yeah, absolutely. No. Cool. Well, look, Paolo, fantastic episode today. Thanks very much for coming in and having a chat with us. Really enjoyed it, and really excited to see where Konfir goes from here. But massive respect for what you've achieved so far, and for the way you guys are going about things. And I like to end every episode with the same question, which you may know by now, which is if you have one favourite piece of advice that you've ever received or given that you kind of carry with you throughout your life that you would pass on to your fellow human, what would that be for you?
Yeah, I've had a bit of that one. It's a hard one too. I've got like 2, but I will take...
I'll give you 2.
I get 2? Okay, thank you. I think the first one would be like from my father, actually. Okay. He always like told me, do what you have to do before what you want to do. And I think it's in business, startup is really important, actually. We always have to, we are engineers, like even if we are leaders, like we are tech people, right? And we want to introduce a new tech and etc. But that's what we want to do and not what we have to do. So it's very important to focus first on what we have to do, business, selling, and etc. And same point actually, it's like almost same point. It's like so building something is only half of the work. Selling it is actually the biggest thing. I have this other example, like when I was at Soprasteria at this digital innovation team, we were building, we were discussing blockchain, we were like introducing blockchain to the clients and etc. And one of the clients came in and said, "Oh, can we do this on the blockchain?" And the salesperson said, "Yeah, of course, we're gonna do the blockchain." And I, with my engineer's eyes, I was like, "We don't really need a blockchain, you know." So and after the meeting, I said, "We don't need a blockchain. Like, we can use a relational database, and that's it." Yeah. And then this sales look at me and say, "You know, Paolo, it's not about blockchain, it's about selling." I'm like, all right, that's a great thing, right? Tech is important, but again, it's like, what is the value and what do you sell to? And even if you provide value, what is the message you put out there to clients and how do you sell it? So yeah, that's why building is only half of the work. The rest is about selling your products.
Yeah, I think that's it's a lovely way to end. Although I do like the fact that you didn't, you were one of those people that didn't oversell just because you could oversell, and it sounded like you were at least not over-engineering the solution for the sake of it, which again I think goes back to your mindset of what you mentioned right at the beginning. But I definitely take your point on that. I think that's a good way to end. So, well, look, nothing remains but to say thank you again for coming in. Really enjoyed the chat, and please come back on again at some point in future. I'd love to hear how you guys are getting on and disrupting the world of employment and background checks. And I'll keep my eye very closely on your progress.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Bye for now.